and the NATO both view President Erdogan as a problem child. Do you think ties between NATO and Ankara are likely to be severed? Do you think it will be forever a myth, if not a dream, for Ankara to be accepted as a member state by the European Union?
I think it's most unlikely. I mean, Ankara has been negotiating with the EU for about 40 years for membership. I don't think there's more than one or two member states who actually really want to see Turkey join the EU. So I think the discussion now is more how to improve the customs union that the EU has with Ankara, how to give some increased status to Turkey here in its relationship with the European Union. And obviously this is going to be based on more money going into Turkey, more access for Turkey's products to the EU market, and also inevitably something on taking on more refugees based in Turkey as well. So I think that's the outline of a future deal. NATO still sees Turkey as an important ally, despite its buying anti-aircraft missiles from Russia, something that particularly angered the United States. But there's no desire within NATO to get rid of Turkey, as one or two commentators have suggested. That's not going to happen either. So I think the status quo will continue there for the foreseeable future.
Let me go back to Mr. Serkan, our Turkish guest speaker. Is it true that on issues of security and foreign policy, President Erdogan may have more margin for the policy maneuvers, but on the issue of economic cooperation and investment, the European Union remains the biggest partner of Ankara. Therefore, President Erdogan has to give a second thought. He has to be very careful about undermining the economic cooperation with Brussels. You look at, say, the economic sanctions imposed unilaterally by White House, that led to the sharp decline in the value of your currency. And therefore, President Erdogan was obviously left quite embarrassed, causing a lot of instability domestically. So my question is, what do you think of the prospects for Turkey to maintain a steady and a healthy relationship with Brussels?
It seems that Erdogan thinks that the EU don't take Turkish concerns seriously, and he demands more friendship from EU in the two sides. First, in the Idlib area, to establish a safety zone for the 2 million new refugees coming to the border. The secondly, taking the 4 million refugees inside Turkey and they by the open door policy to take them to the EU inside Greece, Italy and Germany. But the conflict is that Turkey feels himself lonely and want to act a new Syrian issue to make the cities better, and then decided to do this with Russia and became guarantors to Idlib issue with Russia. There are lots of conflicts between Turkey and Russia, but the common interests are better than the conflicts now. But when you turn to the EU doesn't want to be part of the refugee issue, and Turkey don't want to become a store country of these refugees. So the conflict with the EU is coming from this. And also the 2016 agreement, the articles was free visas for Turks. They didn't make it. And also 3 billion euros for the refugees, health and other issues, they didn't pay it. So
excuse me, Mr. Serkan, let me change the question in another direction. Let's turn to our attention to another area. It's an issue of reconstruction in the war-torn country of Syria. Instead of funding the Turkish government for accepting the settlement of up to the alleged 4 million refugees in your country. By the way, many people are wondering aloud, if they are real refugees. Some might be considered economic asylum seekers, but that's a different issue. Let's look at the post-war reconstruction in Syria. I know there is the chronic issue of the enclave in Idlib. There are a lot of controversies surrounding the prospects between the Turkey-backed rebels and the government troops of President Assad. But why do you think the Europeans refuse to fund reconstruction in Syria? Why don't you send back most of the refugees whose number is put at 3.5 million coming out of Syria? Why don't you send them back to the homeland?
That is an important question. They just faced when the open door policy started this issue. The 2015-16 European refugee crisis, everything was so terrible. But they know that they pay just for refugees 31 euros to Turkey to keep them there. If they keep them inside Europe, they should pay 1,500 euros for one refugee. So they didn't want to be part of this issue, and they just left for a Turkish deal. That was an important point. The second point is, I think they will come to a position to do the safe zone in Syria by this next week's meetings. They had to change the policies. The EU policies were economical crisis, okay, we can understand, but the humanity is not working for the EU. They are isolating their countries. That is against the humanity, and so they had to change this. Germany and France had to change the ideas and the leadership position more friendly to the United Nations solutions and Turkish suggestions in Idlib. But this is so fragile. I can add also, if any attack coming from Syrian regime, then Turkish Spring Shield operation will be hardly going on this area. So I believe that at the end, the worst deal is better than war.
Again, the media is more interested in hostilities and the war. Mr. Serkan, is it true that President Putin may have a very strong belief and convictions that President Erdogan is pretty lonely at this moment? He won't be able to seek any military assistance from NATO despite the membership of NATO. Neither will Ankara be understood and accepted or enjoy any kinds of sympathy from Brussels because of the issue of refugees. Therefore, it's highly likely that the Russians might show increasing defiance against the military maneuvers of the Turks. And therefore, we see strong prospects and bigger chance for the two militaries to have a head-on collision. Although previous head-on collisions have been narrowly averted due to diplomatic solutions. But this time around, we see real dangers of a direct military confrontation between Moscow and Ankara over the issue of Idlib in Syria.
Ankara never planned or target Russian army in the ground. That is an important point. Turkey doesn't want to make any war against them. But
President Erdogan is increasingly viewed by Europeans as assertive. I mean, the media, look at the media in Europe. The media in the European Union keeps bad-mouthing President Erdogan, calling him extremely assertive, and even describing him as a very strong follower of Muslim Brotherhood and the Islamic fundamentalism. They were not talking about Islamic extremism. But the Kurds have been fighting ISIL, and yet it is exactly Kurds that President Erdogan decided to eliminate from the map of Syria.
You're right. You see, the EU doesn't matter about the security of Turkish borders, but they don't have any army. Even they don't have any united army. EU has lost that power on the ground. Where is the France? Where is the Germany about these issues? But Turkey is on the ground and Russia is on the ground, and they make a deal, and this deal makes the safety zone in the region. So I think as EU and Putin, they will both understand, and they will choose Turkish solutions better than the Assad regime or the other terrorist organizations. If
Before we
Putin and
conclude this
Erdogan made
discussion,
an
thank you so
agreement
much,
in Moscow,
Mr.
then they
Thank you
understood.
very much, Serkan. Before we conclude the discussion, quickly let me go back to Pavel for the Russian view on the prospects of having yet another military confrontation between the two militaries in Syria. Pavel, very quickly, what are your thoughts?
Russia would try to avoid the direct confrontation with the Turks, but there's the other problem that from the Russian point of view and from the point of view of Damascus and actually Iran, cleansing out the Syrian armed opposition from Idlib is a must-do situation. And that potentially puts the Turkey and Russia at loggerheads, though there will be attempts to kind of find some kind of magic solution to avoid that.
Thank you so much. Despite the pandemic that has been recently declared by WHO about the new pneumonia, we also have a serious pandemic about the refugees. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.